name is Matt Michael, and I am the host of Eye on Art. And today we're talking to a fine artist that resides in Flint, Michigan, who does wonderful paintings. Lavarne's going to tell us about his experiences as a young man growing up in the city of Flint. So he's going to tell us about his artwork and what inspired his art.
Yeah, my name is Lavarne Ross, and I was born in Flint, Michigan, back in the 40s. I'm an old man. My son says that I am a historian because I'm telling a story through my paintings about Flint, Michigan, and what it was like growing up here, some of the memories of Flint since General Motors has pulled out, and it has become part of what is known as the Rust Belt in the United States today, one of the industrial cities that have fallen prey, you might say, to a new culture or a new industry, or all your manufacturing jobs have gone overseas and what have you, and left many of the cities in their wake. And the cities that they abandoned, many of them have really great stories to tell about the businesses that were there, about the people who lived in those cities that are no longer. But we cannot let those cities just die and go off into oblivion and let the memories of them be forgotten. So one of my goals right now is a series of paintings that I've been working on for a few years called My Flint. And part of My Flint is my history, which Matt and I will discuss.
So My Flint is a series of paintings that you have done, starting with your Windows series over here, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Windows series is part of them.
And then this piece over here, you were explaining to me that was your amusement park?
Yeah, in the city of Flint, there was an amusement park, a full-scale amusement park. And it was a place where people went and enjoyed themselves. They would catch a bus out to the Flint Park, and this piece on the easel, that was one of the church picnics that many of the black churches around the city would congregate there and have an annual picnic. And that's what that one was.
It's very colorful. I like the way you used the lady's dress of kind of a yellowish green and it mixes into the grass. Can you tell me about the colors that you use in it?
Yeah, from an artist standpoint, we have powerful colors on our easels. And yellow and red are a couple of the most powerful colors. And so the yellow being basically one of the very few powerful colors used in there. And she was the outstanding feature. Then we notice how the red is scattered throughout the painting.
Mm-hmm.
When you close your eyes and then open back, what color do you see first?
You see the red.
And so that's how I did that, framed under the leaves on the trees, which opened up like a stage curtain.
Beautiful.
To depict that scene that was going on there.
And then you were born in Flint.
I was born in Flint.
And you still here now?
Still here.
That's wonderful. All your friends, family, you watch them come and
go?
go?
Yeah, most of them. That's a very interesting point. As time went by, you see things, you see experiences, you see your friends that got off on the wrong path and took the wrong route, and they're no longer here. Some of them have moved to other areas in the country, but
I know.
Originated here.
It's tough. It's tough. And so, as a young child, you grew up going to school here, obviously, in Flint.
Mm-hmm.
And then when did you first discover art?
That's interesting because I lived with my grandmother, with my maternal grandmother for a while. And the first painting that I did, I was inspired by seeing movies and things about artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I did my first painting on the back of an old window shade, fabric window shade. And one of the a neighbor lady saw it. I was 13 years old then. A neighbor lady saw it and bought it. I said, wow, let me try this again. And I did, and another neighbor bought it.
Right there and then, you became a professional artist.
I became a professional artist. And from then on, it was exchanging my artwork for favors from girls. I never was off into sports because my art monopolized my life, you might say.
Right.
That was who I was, an artist. And I became known to friends and schoolmates as an artist.
Interesting. And then you grew up, you got out of high school, and, I'm sorry, your first job you were explaining was in high school?
Well, one of my first co-op jobs, as they call them then.
Which is this picture over here, right?
Well, that was my high school art class.
Okay.
And my art teacher used me to help him teach his art class. Later on, a local department store was hiring students, and they chose a Caucasian student out of my art class instead of me. After I had helped the art teacher, he was the one that promoted this kid. Well, he got over there and wondered, well, why me instead of you? And
He must have loved your art.
we were good friends.
Yeah.
And he recommended me to help them over there. And I got a job there, silk screening, in the sign department. After graduation, or at graduation time, I asked the art teacher what kind of jobs were available or careers were available in the art world. What kind of scholarship could I get? You know, I've worked with you and helped you in your art class. What can you do for me?
Right.
He says, don't worry about it. Just go over to Buick and get a job like the rest of your people.
That's an amazing mentality, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was helpful to the point that it made me want to prove to that art teacher that I don't need to be qualified or to be, or your approval to be an artist. I never received a diploma, a piece of paper in art qualifying me as an artist, but my work can be, or has been, or is being promoted around the world, my reproductions.
That's wonderful.
Very few or none of the originals that you see here are some of those prints, but basically speaking, all the rest of them are distributed throughout the world.
Wonderful. And it was an honor for me to be a hand in a lot of those images, haven't I, Ben?
Yeah, you've made the G clays for me, the Amistad, some of the dancers.
Oh, the dancer series behind us. Please tell me about that.
Well, one of the jobs that I got early on was with the Fine Arts Center. The Fine Arts Center had photography, art, dance, and drama. And as one of the directors and an art teacher there at the theater, I wanted to do something with dancers. I've always loved dancing. I can't dance myself with anything. Just continue to do the stage designs and things. I'll take care of the choreography. And a light went off in my head. Dummy, you can choreograph your own dancers on canvas. Put them how you want them, dress them how you want them dressed, and whatever. And the first one I did was called Tribute, and that was a tribute to a very famous famous dancer named Alvin Ailey. And I did a painting called Tribute, and that was the first reproduction I did, which went everywhere. I didn't know if they were using it for food or fuel.
That's a great feeling.
But it went, and it enabled me to follow up with other prints,
Mm-hmm.
and they paid for each other
Oh,
as we went
okay.
along.
Good. That's great.
Those are I call open-end
Mm-hmm.
edition. It's a double-edged sword because the open-end prints, distributors and things would purchase them, and then they would resell them, and they would undercut the prices that I'm asking for them.
Oh, I see.
And
That was difficult for you.
yeah, it was.
Devalues your artwork.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
But at the same time, it promotes the name L. Ross
True.
around the world. So,
It's a hand in hand.
yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But my originals are my originals, my babies.
Now you said that you had some originals that. You said that you had some originals that. What was it? The courthouse now has.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How that came about.
Well, I was working for General Motors at the time, and my superintendent at the factory, he and I really, we got off to a very, very rocky start. We didn't like each other. And one day they were getting the factory ready for open house,
Mm-hmm.
and they were painting the walls and things. And I stopped him and I told him, I says, "Hey, Bob LaRue," I says, "I know an artist that can paint those walls and do more than just paint them one color. We can do murals on those walls." He says, "Yeah, I bet you can." So he walked on by. He went to lunch down in the cafeteria, and he came back by and he says, "Are you serious about that?" Yeah. So we went to his office and we talked about it. He says because of the labor union, he couldn't just make me all of a sudden a painter.
Correct.
So he says, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you off your job and have somebody else do it temporarily, and you paint."
Amazing.
And so I did a painting for that department, and other departments at AC Sparkplug where I was working saw the paintings and they wanted one in their departments, and they went on and on like that. And there were times that there was no room inside the factory facility itself for me to paint, so they let me go off site to different places throughout the city and work on these murals. One particular incident, I wound up in the Greater Flint Arts Council. They would bring children in from the schools and sit them on the floor so that they could watch me paint. And I was doing the history of Michigan at the time, and acting as a teacher, a history teacher, and a painter at the same time. That bus would come in, pick them up, and they bring in another busload of them.
Wow.
To make a long story short, I did about 13 murals, which were distributed to different areas throughout the city of Flint. The Genesee County Courthouse, they stepped forward when the factory was torn down, and they wanted the murals. Would I let them have them? They said they would install them right now, and they did. They installed them permanently inside the Genesee County Courthouse.
That's an honor.
My other son, who now is a executive arts director for Crane Communication, he said he wanted to be an artist. And as a child, a little child, I was working on a mural one time in my apartment and had made the dining room into a studio. And he was about 3, maybe 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I came home from work one day at the hospital and came in, and he had went in and contributed to my mural that I was working on.
Oh no.
And then he had paint, oil paint all around his mouth. Okay, different colors. Well, I know some paints are poison.
Oh no.
I grabbed him and immediately headed back out to my job at the hospital. And my kid got into my paint, he ate some of the paint. So they checked the colors around his mouth and everything. He hadn't eaten any white or any yellow, which were lead. And from that point on, we cared about his having paint in his blood, art in his blood. And he went on, graduated from high school and graduated from Ferris State and became an artist.
Amazing.
And
Great story.
all of my kids have the ability to paint. Some of them, well, most of them don't do it.
Yeah, they want to do other things.
But they grew up in this fine arts facility, going to work with me every day. They were exposed to arts all their lives. And I continued to work on my paintings. And I've pretty much become, you might say, a historian through my artwork about Flint and about different things that I've seen. The one here on the wall, the Amistad, that was a slave ship. And you've done that one before,
Yes.
too. And they built a replica of that ship
Yes.
that travels from port to port around the United States. And the first G-clay that you made of that, that's part of their display as they go around the country.
How nice.
And
That was a beautiful clay
Yeah.
that turned out. Tell me about the piece.
well, Essence Art was the one that originally wanted that piece. But I couldn't find anything in the Flint Public Library about the Amistad. And so a friend of mine who's an art framer and distributor in Maryland, he sent me a package with the blueprints and stories about the Amistad, everything, and I was able to go ahead and do this painting. Well, the movie had been produced by then, so they had no need for it, but so many people wanted it. And then that's when I started having you make G-clays of it.
It's a fabulous piece. I mean, the water alone, how
Well, if you
rough
know-
it is, and then faces in the clouds.
If you notice, the white caps on the water are chains.
Really?
And at the end of those chains are people's hands and things where when they found the slaves that they had captured, they got sick on that voyage or ran out of food. They they chained them up and threw them overboard. And when they got to the United States, Aetna Insurance Company was in business at that time, and they paid those slavers for their commodity or the people that were lost in that voyage.
So they could throw a person overboard and gather money for
And
it.
still get paid for it.
That's amazing. How thoughtless.
And
how
then
thoughtless.
The people
these
in the
were.
clouds, the faces in the clouds are the people who were slaves, and their faces depict the anguish that they had to go through.
Could you imagine being stuffed in a boat with what was 50 to 100 guys or more,
Well, one of the replica,
and laid in?
like sardines, the replica of that ship, I was able to go on board that ship when it was in Baltimore and go down below deck, and it was a feeling that actually is indescribable because there were no windows down there, and you could imagine being chained together and stacked on top of each other. If somebody above you got sick,
It came down on you, or they had to go to the bathroom. If you're the guy on the top, you might be the luckiest one to survive. The guys on the
there were no
bottom
windows below deck, and
smell like a washroom real quick.
yeah.
Tell me about this piece behind us.
This was one of the businesses in my series of paintings, My Flint. I was depicting the businesses and people who grew up in Flint. This was one of the numerous bakeries on the north side of Flint. This was Du Bois Donut Shop, and in the evening, after they finished baking donuts, they would have some that were broken up or they couldn't sell them. But they were super fresh, and we could buy a bag of crisps for, as we call them, for little or nothing. And this is called 3 Bags of Crips.
3 happy kids eating broken up donuts.
Yep.
That's
One of the other businesses, in many cases, people were forced to be entrepreneurs. And one of the other ones is the painting, Zelamay's Barbecue, which was on the corner of Jameson and Industrial, right across the street from Buick. They had the best barbecue going at the time.
Oh my.
And then next one next to it there, that was a watermelon man. He would come down through the neighborhood in the summertime when vegetables were ripe, selling fresh fruits and vegetables.
Ooh.
And then he also sold coal and ice.
Kept people supplied.
Mm-hmm.
That was a simpler time period.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is how refrigeration changed everything, didn't it?
At that time, there was no such thing as a frozen chicken. You went to the poultry market and you either bought him live and took him home until you got ready to eat him. Then you killed him and dressed him out. Then there was the fish man. He sold fish. Different businesses all over the city. That,
The fish man?
yeah, he'd come down through the neighborhood, fresh fish,
Oh,
fresh fish. And these fish were so dry, old, that things have eventually changed to where Buick in this painting, Buick is a fading image, or General Motors.
Now this was a big Buick or General. If you said Fisher Body was here.
We had Buick, Fisher Body, Chevrolet, AC Spark Plug, and there were 2 Fisher Body plants. When I hired in when I hired in AC, there were 3 AC plants, and they've gone. But that painting is called Life Goes On. Buick and or General Motors is fading in the background, but this gentleman up front has to still take care of his kids.
How nice. That's the way it was. I think I'm gonna get up here and have you kind of talk about your pieces.
This one is called Life Goes On. General Motors, or in this case Buick, used to be the main source of people's income in the city of Flint. But as you notice here, the factory is fading off into oblivion. It's going away. The Brinks truck that used to cash the checks, the hundreds of people that worked there. But life goes on, and you notice in the painting that it turns to color. This man has got to feed his kids still, regardless of what General Motors does. He still has to take care of his family. This is my paternal grandmother, Miss Genoa Ross, who lived in Rising, Arkansas. And this is a map of Arkansas in the background. And all the images that were collaged in the painting are people that came from her. My grandfather and her, my father when he was a baby in her arms, and all the other people there. This is my maternal grandmother. This is Miss Nancy Luckydo. She was also originally from Arkansas, but she said, based on this painting up the top of the cotton field, she was coming out of Arkansas and she was not going to raise her children picking cotton. So she brought her family to Flint. My mother is 93, and she said she came to Flint when she was 3 years old. And this is her brothers and sisters, my uncles, aunts. This is my mother, her brothers and sisters, and some of my cousins, and my grandfather, all residents of Flint.
How nice.
The time that General Motors or Buick was going strong, there was a club called the Elks Club. There was an Elks Club in Toledo, there was an Elks Club in Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw. And they would have annual events or parades in each city various times. This one was in Flint, Elks Parade, and all the people would come from the neighborhood that lived in the neighborhood would come down and line the street and watch the parade go by. In the city of Flint at the time that Buick was popular or going business, We also had entrepreneurs. This was a watermelon man, and in the summertime he sold fruits and vegetables. In the wintertime, or all year long, they had ice boxes back then, and he also sold ice and coal. And we notice in these paintings that you can see Buick over the top of the trees. You can see Buick here. The north side of Flint, if you were African American, you were relegated to an area on the north side of Flint between the Flint River and North Saginaw. So, and Buick ran right down the middle of it, on the Industrial Avenue side and on the St. John Avenue side. But at any rate, this was the Watermelon Man. And then right across the street from Buick was also the barbecue place. This was called Zella Mae's Barbecue. And that was always crowded. They had really, really good barbecue. And if you didn't want any barbecue, if you weren't hungry, they had this barbecue pit on the outside wall which piped that smell and that smoke out into the neighborhood. So by the time you got to it, you wanted something. Polish sausage sandwich or a rib sandwich or something. But they stayed busy. Here we have a family reunion in somebody's backyard. Could have been Aunt Thelma's backyard or anybody's backyard. And you notice also through the trees and over the top of the houses, you can see Buick and barbecue pit and different family members coming over to Aunt Thelma's for barbecue, for family reunion. Being relegated on the north side of Flint, we had our own theaters, we had our own Coney Islands, jewelry stores and things like that. This was on the corner of Leith and Industrial. This is called the Richard Theater. And you see the people going to a show for that evening. On the St. John side of Buick, on the east side of Buick, you had the St. John Street area, and they had the Columbia Theater over there. And you had bars and grocery stores up and down the street there. This one is called the Water Boy. This is a cotton field down south, and he had the best job going. But this is also what my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, said she was not going to raise her children picking cotton. And she left and came up north, up to Flint. And when she got to Flint, they lived behind a place called Canaan Church. Canaan Church's parking lot was our backyard. This particular piece here, one of the window series, is called 9/11. 9/11 was where I was born. This is myself in the middle. My first cousin Doug, he and I are 16 days apart, and his brother Donald, and two other kids in the neighborhood, Junebug and Fuzz. And we were sitting on the back steps of Canaan Church, which was about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. And we sit up there because the red bricks absorbed the heat and they were warm, and we were up out of the snow sitting on the back porch of the church. This particular piece is called 4046 Main, and this is one of the houses that were relocated when Buick started its expansion. And this is the house that my cousin Doug lived in, and this is Doug and myself in that painting. This is my sisters and my brother James and Chris and Bebe. Those are two kids that lived upstairs. This was the original photograph that they were taking, that the painting was based on. And this is Gail and Nita and Ruthie. Yeah, this one is called, the title of this painting is 1118. And this is another house we lived in on the north side of Flint. This was my brother James and his dog Ace sitting on the back porch. This I call my masterpiece. This is called The Games of Life. And I did this painting based on the fact that our children, our young people, are like pawns on this game board called life. And um, personally, I use the Bible to help back up what was going on here. I use the Bible to back up what's going on in the game of life, period. And we're going to start out with this cloudy, tumultuous looking sky that these children are facing today. And here we have this young man smoking a crack pipe. If he continues to do that, there are only 3 options available to him. That bullet hole indicates that someone's going to kill him, or the poison sign indicates that the drug will kill him, or he's going to wind up in jail. On the back of his neck, we have our babies having babies. This young girl is 14 years old, still playing with dolls and teddy bears herself, led out by the guiding light, or this internet mentality. And this is what has influenced her into the shape that she's in. We also have our babies being affected by this mentality of today. This child has a .357 Magnum in his lap, but his shirt indicates that that's his constitutional right to bear arms in this country. But Matthew 24:12 in the Bible says, because of an increase of lawlessness, the love of the greater number is going to cool off. Well, I applied that to him because in many cases he ceases to be a loving little baby and grows up to be a gangbanger or a thug. He's still somebody's kid, but he's very dangerous, surrounded by the all too familiar yellow tape, ambulances, and the police in the neighborhoods. Then we have these 3 silhouettes all in one. This first silhouette, you notice, is cut out of a dollar bill. And the scripture that goes with that is 1 Timothy 6:9 and 10. The love of money is the root of all evil, or full of all types of injurious things. Money itself, there's nothing wrong with it, but the love of money has led to many injuries. This one has no eyes, because this scripture says that the minds of the unbelievers will be blinded by the God of this system of things, Satan the devil. And we can see the influence of these 2 scriptures all around us. This one has bright red eyes, indicating fierceness, because in 2 Timothy, in the 3rd chapter, it identifies the last days. In the last days, fierceness is one of the things. Men will become fierce, puffed up with pride. Children will become disobedient to parents. How fierce are they? What have our city streets turned into? A drive-by shooting gallery, where everybody is a target. Your gang member, your innocent little boy, your gang member, and your innocent little kid, little girl. Then I use a slot machine to depict the sex game. When you decide to play that game and pull the handle on it, what's going to line up for you? Is it going to be AIDS, good sex, or pregnancy? In her case, it was obvious, but it could have been all 3. And then we come down to the board, the floor, the game itself. This young lady is moving into this square, Romans 12:2, which says, quit being molded or fashioned after this system of things. Plus, she's got her books in her arm, indicating she's getting an education. Those 2 things together are forming a degree of protection for her against all of this. Her next move would make that shield even stronger, because Exodus 20:12 says, honor your father and your mother, and your days will be long. After that, she moves into John 17:3, which says, this means everlasting life. They're taking in knowledge of you, the one and the only true God, and of the one you sent forth, Jesus Christ. Her next move, Psalms 119:105, says, let his word be a lamp to your foot and a light to your pathway. So after you take this knowledge in, use it like a light or a lamp. Put to use what you've learned. And his word is mentioned again, God's word, the Bible, is mentioned again in Hebrews 4:12 and 13, where it says his word is like a sharp, 2-edged sword, exerting power. And we know that that is the only thing that can do anything about changing this world that we're in right now.
Interesting.
This young man, well, in the game of chess, the object of the game of chess is to get to your opponent's castle where the king is. In the game of life, Matthew 6:33 says, the object of the game of life is to get into God's kingdom. This young man hasn't made up his mind what move he wants to make. But just like any serious board game that we play, time determines when it's your move. Our time started when we took our first breath of life. We were in the game. And so from that point on, it doesn't matter whether you want to play or not. It all depends on what move you make as to whether you survive. I use female, male, black, and white because everybody's got to play the game of life. This is called Mr. Kicks, and it's based on a song by Oscar Brown Jr. Permit me to introduce myself. My name is Mr. Kicks. He says, I hail from a dark old hellhole down by the river Styx. The devil has sent me here because I'm full of wicked tricks, and I'm such a popular fellow among all you lunatics. He says, I teach a course in ruination, the powder, cocaine, the crack, the rocks, and the syringes. He says, I teach a course in ruination from the devil's text to fools who can't withstand temptation. Step right up your necks. And Mr. Kicks, I put some gold foil on his teeth and gave him some shades and a assault rifle and his sickle with the blood dripping off of it. But I also put a FUBU t-shirt on him because the FUBU is a popular clothing line. Many young people are running around with FUBU t-shirts and FUBU clothing on, not knowing what it means. But it's for us, by us. And I asked the young people in school, who's selling all the drugs in your neighborhood? Who's doing all the killing in your neighborhood? For us, by us. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and a number of these pieces that we've shown in this segment were made available by you through your G-Clays that I have had done by you.
And it's been an honor.
And hopefully we can keep it going, because many of the pieces that you shot here, the original pieces, My Flint, will only be available through your business.
Thank you for the compliment, and I hope to help you bring your artwork to the children of the future.
Mm-hmm.